Hello, my friends, and welcome back for another graphing lesson. This one's going to be a very nice, rounded out lesson because today we're going to explore pie graphs. And let me show you one before we go any further. There's a pie graph I just made for you guys. It's the types of plants in my garden. What do you notice about this? Let's look at all the parts and learn to interpret it. We have a data table, and it shows us each type of plant and the number there were. It also tells us the total, and that number is going to be super important in just a bit. And on this side, of course, the pie graph or circle graph, whichever one's more delicious for you. And this one's filled with the different vegetables I'm growing: peas, beans, tomatoes, peppers, squash, and pumpkins. And what's cool about this graph is you can see a proportion. If we take all those things, that total number, that 42, and put them visually, if we made them something physical, how much would there be? Well, we can see that pretty easily here with those slices of pie. But how do you make one of these? Well, it's a little complex, but if you know something about angles and you know a bit about circles and you know a bit about math, this isn't too hard. So, what do you need to make one? You will need a piece of graph paper, some fantastic pencils, a straight edge, and also something circular. Now, mine's a pretty good-sized circle and actually came from the classroom. I also have a protractor that just so happens to be about the same. You may not have these two things, and you may not have this protractor. So when we get to that part, it might be a little bit more difficult. But if you do have one of these, go and grab it. And do find something circular. About this size is pretty good. Getting smaller is going to get harder. Getting bigger is going to be a lot more work, but bigger would be better than smaller. So let's get started. With any graph, we always need some kind of a question. For me, it's going to be the same one I used on my bar graph and histogram. The ages of you, my students. The first thing I'm also going to do is fold this in half because I love making little pamphlets and booklets for my graphs. So, the ages of my students. That's what I would like to show. What are the ages of my students? I would have to go find that out. Luckily, I've done this twice already, and I still have that data sitting around. So, I can give this a nice title: Ages of my students. I could also call this the ages of the students of the lower elementary of Sagebrush Montessori School, but wow, that'd be a long title too, wouldn't it? This is pretty good. The ages of my students. And of course, I'll want to have a table showing my data points. So let's set that table up. And we'll draw a line right down the center. Okay, on this side I'll write ages, and on the other side the number. And those numbers are going to become extremely important. What ages do we have? Well, I know we have 6, 7, 8, 9, and a 10-year-old. And how many of each of those do we have? Let's see. 8 6-year-olds, 7 7-year-olds, 6 8-year-olds, 5 9-year-olds, and 1 10-year-old. Pretty cool. But where we need to go a little further is we need to know the total as well. That is extremely important. The total number of students that we have. And how many is that? Can you add that up for me? 27 students in this class. Okay, 27. Now, this is going to take some imagination because this circle, you want to think of it now as being split up into 27 pieces. Each of those pieces is a student. When we put those pieces together into slices, that's when you start to see this pie come together. So, take your circular object and trace it onto your paper. Pretty simple, right? Hopefully that went very well for you as well. Okay, the next thing we want to do is figure out what that is, that slice I just told you about. How many degrees are there in a circle? And you may know this, or you may need to measure that out real quick to remember that it is 360 degrees. One of these has 180 degrees on it, and if you multiply that by 2 and make a whole, you'll have 360. So there's 360 degrees available in this circle. We really need to know where the center point of this circle is. That might be harder for some of you to find than others, but do your best to find that center point. I actually will use my protractor that fits right in there. We need that center point because around that center point is 360 degrees, and we need to make out 27 groups of those. So we need to know what is 360 divided by 27. Did you get that for me yet? Yeah, I know. That's a really annoying one, isn't it? 13.333333333333. But you know what? For this kind of work and for this kind of graph, we don't need to worry about making it 13.33333333. We can do a little bit more than 13 and it should work. But what that means is that each of you in this pie graph are represented by 13 and a little bit more degrees. So that 10-year-old right there is a slice of pie that is 13 degrees and a little more. The angle of it from that center point is 13 and a little bit more. Means that groups of students that are 6-year-olds, and there's 8 of them, 8 of you, we need to multiply that number by that 13 and a little bit more. So we need to multiply all these numbers by 13 and a little bit more to find out how big that slice is. So let's do that real quick, and then we'll find out what those slices are going to be. All right, I know this is some complicated work, but I thought you might be ready for it. We need our protractor again, and we need to get our first slice set up. I think we're going to go with the 6-year-olds, and there's 8 of them. And 8 times 13 and a little more is about 106 and a half. So we're going to make a line straight from the top of our center point to the top of the circle to get our slice started. Now we can measure an angle from that line. And our angle needs to be 106 and a half, about that. So let's find out where that is, starting at this side all the way around. There it is, 106 and a half. I'm going to make a little bit of a dot there, and then I'm going to connect that dot to my center point. That is the slice of pie that represents all of my 6-year-olds. And I'm going to color that in. What color you guys like? Orange, huh? Cool. All right, nice orange slice of pie, but I'm going to do something else now. I'm going to be working on a key at the same time. I want everybody to know what is in this pie graph. And they could look at the data table, but it might be a little harder to really figure out what it is. So if you've noticed, I've just made an orange square, and next to my orange square, I'm going to write 6 years old. Because everybody in that slice of pie is 6 years old. And now it's time to move on to the 7-year-olds. And 7 times 13 and a little more is about 93. So our next angle from that last line we drew needs to be 93 degrees. Let's set up our protractor and find 93 degrees. It's right over here. So this slice of pie should be a bit smaller than our last one, but still pretty big. That slice of pie is our 7-year-olds. What color for the 7-year-olds? They're pretty cool too. Yeah, I think green is actually a great color. So we'll make a green square. I'll do that first this time. 7-year-olds. 7 years old. And there's my developing key with the colors I'm using, and let's get this colored in. All right, so we've got 2 slices done, and we've got 3 to go. Our next group is of 6 students, so we need to multiply that by 13.3, and we get just under 80. Just under 80. Bring my protractor back out and measure that angle. Just under 80. There we are. Oop. And there's our next slice there for our 8-year-olds. Oh, what color are 8-year-olds? Probably red, right? Let's get them colored in and let's get that added to our key. Fantastic. 3 slices and 2 more to go. Our next group is of 5 students. 5 times 13 and a little more. It's like 66 and a half. How cool is that? Let's get that on there. Measure that angle out there. Lining up my protractor. And 66 and a half. Right there, which actually also creates our last slice. That last slice for that one student, and I would bet if you measure that angle, it would be about 13 and a little bit more. You know, you 9-year-olds are pretty purple, so we're going to go with that. Okay, and just one more slice to color in. Ooh, what do we have here? How about this golden yellow for you kings and queens of the classroom? Okay, and now you can see that our pie graph is done. Now, the pie graph has received a lot of criticism because it is very hard to really read it and get a good idea of an accurate number of what's going on. It's, even if you found out, a little bit hard to get accuracy when you're making it. We were doing 13 and a little bit more. We could use calculators and all sorts of special tiny microscopes to make sure it's perfect, but generally you can still see that there's obviously way more 6-year-olds, not as many 7-year-olds, less 8-year-olds, even less 9-year-olds, and just very few 10-year-olds. So I'm interested to see what kinds of topics you might try to put into this pie graph, and hey, it might even be the kinds of pie people eat. Who knows? But it should be fun and should bring us right round about. See you again soon.